Hey guys, so before anyone clicks the time marker in the description below, I just want to say a couple things. I know I usually start these videos by explaining that there's two singularities running alongside each other, the technological singularity and the spiritual singularity. Um, for the most part, I'm pretty much done with talking about the tech singularity in detail. I mean, it already happened. It happened a while ago. We've been living in it. And it's only now that we're seeing so much acceleration in novelty that some people are starting to realize, hey, wait a minute, there's something really odd about this reality, aka this lower collective consciousness that everyone here calls Earth. And, you know, discussing the technological singularity over and over again at this point, it's just not productive for what I'm trying to do here. So, if anyone wants more info on the technological singularity, I would say just use my older videos as a reference. But for now, it's not something that I want to go into detail about. But I do want to read a couple comments real quick. Patricia Staten asked, quote, in short, what is the singularity, unquote? And someone named Merquava replied, they said, quote, when a group of entities, whatever that would be, suddenly coalesce into one unit and become self-aware as that unit, each part synced with every other part, each part capable of communication with every other part simultaneously, and thinking and behaving as one. Some of us believe one singularity will occur through technology, while the other singularity involving soulful human beings will occur using the heart as a catalyst, unquote. So I just wanted to read Merquava's comment because I really liked what they had to say. And I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but the last part about the soulful human beings that Merquava was talking about, I think that was a reference to the spiritual singularity. And Mikey Crayon left a comment a couple videos back that said, quote, thanks for the shout out, food for thought, are having two singularities an oxymoron, unquote. And then I responded back to him and said, quote, I often have the same thought because by definition the word singularity implies a single thing. Technically there can't be two singularities because neither would be a singularity. I think that ultimately there's only one singularity, and it's the spiritual singularity. What we call the technological singularity is just one of many catalysts that are contributing to our acceleration towards the spiritual singularity. I think for now I'll still continue to refer to them as two singularities in order to make it easier for the new people to understand the material. However, you're absolutely right. There is only one singularity, the spiritual singularity. In the end, all the atrocities of this world only serve to push us closer to God, unquote. So, I think this is true on both the collective and individual level in terms of spiritual evolution. Like all the BS you've had to deal with in your life, all the targeting you went through, it made you the person you are today. And I know it sounds cliche, but it's true. Like if you were always totally happy in your life and you always got everything you wanted, you wouldn't feel the need to go to God for shelter. Or you might, but the urgency to connect with God wouldn't be there. So I don't want to sound cold or dismissive, but be grateful. Be grateful for all the craziness you've had to deal with. Even though they weren't conscious of it, they did their job beautifully of pushing you towards God. And in the end, that's all that matters. Nothing of this lower realm lasts forever. So be grateful that you're part of a small group of people that'll merge with the spiritual singularity. And it is a very small number. All right, so anyone who's already familiar with my other videos where I talk about the spiritual singularity, like what the spiritual singularity is and how the retrocausality language talks to us from the future. If you want to, you can just click the time marker in the description below if you want to skip ahead to the new stuff. I always try to put time markers in all my videos in the description so people can just skip ahead. But for anyone who's new, I just want to explain what the spiritual singularity is. And a lot of times I'll refer to it as just the singularity. So when you hear me say singularity, I'm not necessarily talking about the technological singularity. So I guess I need to start out by defining what retrocausality is. Retrocausality is when the future affects the past. So it's when something happens in the future that has such a profound effect on consciousness that it ripples back into its past, which is our present, and influences today's events in just the right way to create a scenario where we end up merging with that thing in the future that's rippling back to us, if that makes sense. Now, technically, we could also say it rippled back beyond our present day to influence all of human history, but I'm trying to keep things simple, so we'll just focus on how the stuff happening in our present day is a result of the singularity that happened in the future. And there's actually two singularities happening alongside each other at the same time right now. That's why the world seems so polarized right now. And both singularities have created their own self-sustaining time loop that we're living in. Like, we think this is just regular life, but our whole life has actually been taking place inside of a time loop. And it's either a negative time loop or a positive time loop, depending on which singularity we're talking about. Now, from a higher perspective, time is an illusion because everything is happening in God's now. But from our linear human perspective, the concept of retrocausality, I think it helps us to better understand what's really going on. So basically, what's going on is there's two singularities, the technological singularity and the spiritual singularity. Now, some people will merge with the AI hive mind through the DNA transhumanism of the tech singularity. And some people, a much smaller number, will merge with the Christ consciousness of the spiritual singularity. And I say will merge, but it's already happened. But the original singularity is the spiritual singularity. And it's totally impossible to fully describe accurately with human words or concepts. The best I can do is say it's when some of us experience an altered state of consciousness when we merge with Christ consciousness. It's a state where we're able to feel God's unconditional love. Like it's we say that it's an emotion, but it's so much more than an emotion. Like, it's an actual altered state of consciousness, and in that altered state of consciousness, you can feel God's unconditional love, like in a tangible way that's undeniable and indescribable. So the spiritual singularity, it's like a magnet that exists in the future that's pulling us towards it. That's why I say the spiritual singularity already happened. There's a part of us that already exists in that future. And from the perspective of our higher self, you could say we've already merged with the singularity. I mean, the spiritual singularity, because our higher self is already fully merged with it. But from the linear perspective of our earthly human selves, it feels like we're accelerating towards something that hasn't happened yet. But it's that acceleration itself that's being caused by the fact that it's already happened. Otherwise, there'd be nothing to pull us towards it. So it's like one big circle or time loop. And, as we continue to accelerate towards the spiritual singularity, the waves of Christ consciousness are only going to increase in intensity and duration. Like, some of us are already starting to experience the waves of Christ consciousness that come and go. Really, it's so powerful that I don't think it could happen all at once, because, it'd be too much of a shock to our system. I think it's a process that's gonna span years. So, earlier I said the retrocausality language communicates to us from the future. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but at the end of this video, I'm gonna put 2 exercises up so you can tune into the retrocausality language yourself. Like, please do not take my word for it. The best evidence is through your own personal experience. But for anyone who's new, basically the retrocausality language is it's an advanced form of communication that comes from the future. Now, music and synchronicities seem to be a big part of it, but it's not limited to only music and synchronicities. It uses many different means to try to get our attention. And like I was telling Shane, some people think it's our higher self sending the messages back to us from the future, and some people think it's God. I think it's a combination of both. It's a language that's used to try to describe the indescribable. And the spiritual singularity definitely falls into that category. God, Christ consciousness, all those things are impossible to accurately describe using human words the way we do. But see, the retrocausality language is so advanced that it uses archetypes to get a message across. I mean, it's so intelligent. It can use things like archetypes in music to reflect the evolution of your soul. So, an archetype, what that is that's a unit or container that holds encoded information, usually in the form of multiple symbols and metaphors. I think an archetype is more powerful than a symbol just because it can hold more information. So it has the ability to communicate knowledge that's more complete than what you'd find in a single symbol, if that makes sense. And one archetype that keeps popping up for a lot of people in the community is the consciousness arc. So like songs that talk about the ocean or rivers or like sailing or ships, those are all references to the consciousness arc, because all those bodies of water they're like a metaphor for the God ocean. You could think of all of us as drops of water that merge with the God ocean when we merge with the spiritual singularity and experience Christ consciousness. And boarding the consciousness arc is a metaphor that represents tuning into the retrocausality language in a way that helps us merge with the spiritual singularity and float on that God ocean of love. And just like on a lot of my other videos, the 3 songs I'm going to play at the end of this video transmits multiple references about the consciousness arc. So, like, there's lines in the songs that mention the word sail and ocean tide. The word sea, S-E-E, changed to take on an additional meaning of sea, S-E-A. And then the word shore, S-U-R-E, also took on an additional meaning of shore, S-H-O-R-E, as in needing to be sure and not carry any doubt in order to reach the shore for the consciousness arc. But before I play these songs, I just want to show you guys some of the other transmissions I got when the retrocausality language got overlaid on top of the music. And, when you do this on your own, you're going to notice some reoccurring themes that seem to pop up in multiple songs too. So the word on stood out as a reference to turning your mind on to see the spiritual singularity and Christ consciousness is real. And the word morning stood out as a time of spiritual awakening. The word down morphed into being about pulling God's love down from the spiritual realm to enter your heart. There's a line in one of the songs that says, quote, and I said, who to you, unquote. So I've talked about this on other videos, how the retrocausality language will literally ask questions to get you to exercise your free will, to wake up to the answer. And I'm just gonna speak for myself, because I can only speak for myself. If God were a loving, all-knowing force or entity who is infinitely kind, then it makes sense that he'd make a concession to the limited state of consciousness that we're in right now by taking on the role of a loving parent who would lead their child to the answer by asking a question. And I feel he'd want his child to discover the answer themselves on their own. Like, a loving parent would never try to dictate and force the answer onto their child. They would teach their child and ask them questions to encourage them to, reach the right conclusion on their own. And what I found is the retrocausality language will never violate anyone's free will and force someone to hear the messages. So it's up to us to choose to open up our minds and tune into it. And some people will and some people won't, and that's okay. I'll put a link in the description to a video I did that has some really good songs at the end that ask these kind of soul-searching questions in the lyrics. It's titled The Singularity and Free Will. It's just one video. But I will say one thing that can stand in the way of hearing the retrocausality language is being in a bad mood or being distracted by overthinking. So I define the mind as the thoughts we think, and I define consciousness as awareness. Consciousness is the essence of what we are, but the mind kind of acts like a filter that the information has to pass through before it can come into our conscious awareness. And that's why I always say to clear your mind of any negative or distracting thoughts if you want to tune into the retrocausality language. But going back to the song line that kept asking who, I think that transmission was a means to kind of, encourage us to use our free will to answer the question, who's sending these messages via the retrocausality language? Like, what is it that has the ability to send these personalized transmissions through the music? Some people think it's our higher selves, and some people think it's God. Personally, I think it's both. But, again, I'm only speaking for myself. The messages you get through the music are for you and you alone to make that judgment call. But anyways, the word in changed to mean going inside your heart within your own God center instead of focusing on the so-called external material world. And I'm not going to decode everything, guys, because I don't want this video to be too long. But the word come changed to mean arriving at a higher state of consciousness whenever we merge with the spiritual singularity and experience a Christ consciousness wave. And the word gone in the lyrics was about leaving a lower state of consciousness to merge with the spiritual singularity. For me, the word child and children got changed into a metaphor for God's children or a child of God. And even the word sunrise morphed into two words. So sun, S-O-N, and rise, with rise being a metaphor for rising to a higher state of consciousness that's closer to God. The word above stood out as a reference to where God resides. So I put the word where in quotes because it's only from a relative perspective that we can say that God exists in a higher realm or dimension. But that doesn't mean that we have to feel like we're separated from him, because from an absolute perspective, there's nowhere you could go where God wouldn't be there with you. In a way, you could think of us kind of like a turtle who carries around its shell wherever it goes, if that makes sense. So like his presence is built into the fabric of our consciousness. Just like a turtle shell is a part of the turtle itself, God is a part of us, and we could never ever truly be separated. Now we can forget and fall into the illusion of thinking that God isn't here with us, but that's really more so about the apparent person being in a delusional or blind state. But we aren't our bodies. I know you guys know that we are not our bodies. We're consciousness. And there's actually a line in the songs that mention the word mirror and reflection. Now, for me, both those words stood out as a reference to looking within oneself to decode universal truths reflected in God's creation or consciousness. Really, you could say God's consciousness, because nothing exists independent from God's consciousness. Now, from a biblical perspective, you could say we're made in God's image, and that's how the whole mirror reflection thing works. And that does make sense, but I don't know, I took it a step further and heard those lines as a reference about us being holographic consciousness fractals of God, because fractals are holographic in nature and contain a reflection of the whole. So it really does make sense that the retrocausality language would try to transmit messages about a mirror archetype and a reflection archetype. I think ultimately our consciousness or awareness is like a mirror that God uses to view every imaginable aspect or reflection of himself. And I'm almost done decoding, guys. The word life morphed into an archetype for God's life force or Christ consciousness, and the word older stood out as meaning growing older spiritually, so evolving to feel closer with God. And like I said, we're never really separated from God, but evolving spiritually is what allows us to become consciously aware of that. But the homophone win, W-H-E-N, got changed to win, W-I-N. So it was a retrocausality reference indicating that we've already won the spiritual war. And all winning the spiritual war is just returning to a higher state of consciousness where we can experience God's unconditional love. And I say returning just because before we were born and fell into this state of amnesia, it was normal to always be in a state of experiencing Christ consciousness. That was normal. This state of consciousness here on earth that is dominant for most people, that lower state of consciousness is not normal. Another homophone that got changed was the word night. So night, N-I-G-H-T, got changed to night, K-N-I-G-H-T, as in like a knight of God, warrior for God, or armor of God. And then the last thing I want to decode is the word till. Now, I'm not sure if the official lyrics have changed because different sources show different spellings of the word till for that song. But if anyone has the actual album with the lyrics on it, then just let me know in the comments. So in the lyrics, it's supposed to be apostrophe T-I-L, but when the lyrics got overlaid with the retrocausality language, the meaning for till became till, T-I-L-L. So the T-I-L-L, that meaning, that became the dominant meaning. And I'm not going to, go into detail because I already talked about this on other videos. And I'll put a link in the description below to another video that gets deeper into the whole till thing. But the literal definition of till relates to a tool to harvest crops, i.e. till the land. Now, for me, because the retrocausality language uses very personalized archetypes, for me, till stood out as a reference to the holy harvest. So the tilling is something that's done on a spiritual level. And like I said, I get into this more in my other video, but basically the retrocausality language communicated to me earlier that we have to till our mind to prepare for the holy harvest of new earth. So the tilling is done by staying present and focusing on being in the now moment, because the now moment is where the peace is. Okay, so I want to go ahead and play these 3 songs, but keep in mind, like I always say, the retrocausality language it's trying to describe the indescribable. So there'll be times when it won't always follow what we'd consider to be proper grammar. And keep in mind too, the retrocausality language uses archetypes to reflect each person's unique spiritual journey. That's why 2 people can hear the exact same song and get different messages. But just make sure you're looking at the screen, guys. That way you can see the lyric changes that I highlighted as you're listening to the song. And, just use this time to slow down and focus on God. That's really the only thing you need to focus on while you're listening to the music. So take a moment to just clear your mind of all the distractions and negative thoughts and just focus on God's love and be present with God. And ask yourself, God, if you could send me a message or a sign through this song, what would you want to tell me about?
Sunrise, sunrise, looks like morning in your eyes, but the clock's held 9:15 full hours. Sunrise, sunrise, couldn't tempt us if it tried, 'cause the afternoon's already come and gone. And I said, ooh, but I'm sure it's written all over my face. Surprise, surprise, never something I could hide. When I see we made it through another day, then I say, ooh, 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 to you. Now the night will throw its cover down on me again. Ooh, and if I'm right, well, it's the only way to bring me back. Ooh, ooh, to you. To you. I took my love, took it down. I climbed a mountain and I turned around, and I saw my reflection in snow-covered hills till the landslide brought me down. Oh, mirror in the sky, what is love? Can the child within my heart rise above? Can I sail through the changing ocean tides? Can I handle the seasons of my life? Well, I've been afraid of changing, 'cause I've built my life around you. But time makes you bolder, even children get older, and I'm getting older too. Well, I've been afraid of changing, 'cause I've built my life around you. But time makes you bolder, even children get older, and I'm getting older too. Oh, I'm getting older too. Take my love, take it down. Climb a mountain and turn around. And if you see my reflection in the snow snow-covered hills where the landslide bring it down. And if you see my reflection in the snow-covered hills, well, the landslide bring it down. Oh, the landslide bring it down.
Have I told you lately that I love you? Have I told you there's no one else above you? Fill my heart with gladness, take away all my sadness, ease my troubles, that's what you do. For the morning sun and all its glory greets the day with hope and comfort too. You fill my life with laughter, and somehow you make it better. Ease my troubles, that's what you do. There's a love that's divine, and it's yours and it's mine like the sun. And at the end of the day, we should give thanks and pray to the one, to the one. Have I told you lately that I love you? Have I told you there's no one else above you? Fill my heart with gladness, take away all my sadness, ease my troubles, that's what you do. There's a love that's divine, and it's yours and it's mine like the sun. And at the end of the day, we should give thanks and pray to the one, to the one. And have I told you lately that I love you? Have I told you there's no one else above you? You fill my heart with gladness, take away my sadness, ease my troubles, that's what you do. Take away all my sadness, fill my life with gladness, ease my troubles, that's what you do. Take away all my sadness, fill my life with gladness, ease my troubles, that's what you do.